Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Everything happened so fast that no one was able to react in time. Mogazer, who was standing on top of the ramparts, was blown away by the impact of the magic cannonballs. Fortunately, Barca was there to catch and shield him from further damage, but he still ended up suffering mild injuries. Unfortunately, the orc hunters' subordinates weren't as lucky. Hundreds of them died, while others were seriously injured. A good portion of the fortress walls was also destroyed by the magic cannon, forming a gaping hole in the orc fortress that had stood for decades. Earth mages, create an earth wall at once, Lady Aviana ordered, and the orcs who specialized in earth magic worked hand in hand to create a dense wall of earth that rose above the ground and positioned itself between the orc fortress and the Hakka dynasty's army. As soon as the walls were erected, the sound of cannons being fired spread in the surroundings. The earthen walls immediately shattered, and the magic cannonballs continued their trajectory, hitting the defensive walls of the fortress and creating deep dents in them. Although the earth walls shattered, it still helped lessen the impact of the cannonballs, allowing the fortress to withstand another bombardment. "This won't do," Baranar shouted to Lady Aviana, who was standing at a watchtower at the center of the fortress, overlooking the battle. "They can hit us, but we can't hit them back. Also, look at the sky." The great orc shaman pointed at the giant magic circle that was slowly forming above the orc fortress, which made Lady Aviana's face turn grim. A grand spell from that distance? Oreg gasped in shock as he looked at the runic symbols whose light was slowly becoming more intense, signaling that the spell was nearing its completion. By the gods, how are we going to deal with this? Grand spells were high-ranking spells that were used to destroy entire fortresses. However, this spell was very complicated and needed tens of thousands of mages to cast it simultaneously. Also, while the mages were performing this spell, none of them could move, which made them vulnerable to any attacks. Only when their safety was assured would they cast a spell of such magnitude to destroy their foes in a blaze of glory. Ariad updated Astiri's at n//vel/bin, calm. How can this be? Our fortress is about to fall without even clashing with the enemy directly. Barca glared hatefully at the giant magic circle above their heads. He initially thought that they could at least kill tens of thousands of the invaders before leaving their fortress behind. However, aside from the few hundred that Mogazer had killed earlier, the Hakka dynasty's army was still intact, making him feel very bitter. However, he didn't have time to feel bitter for long because another side of the fortress exploded after being repeatedly bombarded by the magical cannons, which were firing at them from a mile away. "Baranar, can you delay that grand spell from being unleashed?" Lady Aviana asked. "I'll try, but the most I can do is buy us a minute or two," Baranar replied as he began to chant something in the Orcish tongue. Lady Aviana knew that there was no time to hesitate, so she immediately signaled to one of her aides to blow the horn that would tell everyone in the fortress to evacuate right now. "Everyone, evacuate," Lady Aviana ordered. "Head to the mountains of Lorgakkor. We will use the mountains to mount a counterattack." All the orc warriors gritted their teeth as they helped their injured comrades to retreat. Their orc chieftain's order was absolute, and, even though they wanted to fight their enemies, they were simply too far and too many for them to mount an effective counterattack. While the orcs were busy dealing with the evacuation, the sound of horns erupted inside the orc fortress, which reached all the way to the Hakka dynasty's army. This made Rowan, who was standing beside one of the magic cannons, roar in laughter. "What's this? Over already?" Rowan guffawed as he looked at the crumbling fortress in the distance. "Great General, why don't we send our heavy cavalry to attack? I'm sure we can kill thousands of them if we go now." Great General Garrett shook his head. "If we go there now, we will just lose our soldiers. The orcs would risk their lives to kill as many of our soldiers as possible because in their culture, retreating without even being able to clash with their enemies is a very shameful thing. If we were to do as you say, then I wouldn't have used the magic cannons this early in the war. Just behave yourself for now and listen to my orders. You will have your chance to kill them when we go deeper into their territory." Ronan chuckled after hearing the great general's reply. He was really itching to fight against Barca, who was several times stronger than him. As a high ranker, he knew that he was no match against the Empyrean-ranked alpha monster in a one-on-one battle. However, he wasn't going to fight the half-orc alone. He had already handpicked a dozen high rankers who would assist him with the job. Because of this, he was confident that if he ever faced Barca on the battlefield, the one who would be dying would be none other than the half-orc. It was at this moment that they saw several spirits flying toward the sky in an attempt to disperse the giant magic circle above the fortress. Garrett had already anticipated this move, but he didn't do anything. The spirits might be able to delay the grand spell, but they could only prevent it from activating for a short period of time. They wouldn't be able to stop the inevitable. "How does it feel, Aviana?" Great General Garrett said softly. "Do you feel helpless? Do you feel unresigned? I wish I could see your face. Perhaps it was the same face that my father made when you forced him to retreat back to the Hakka dynasty 50 years ago." The great general's eyes glowed faintly with power as he looked at the crumbling fortress in the distance. He was certain that within the hour, nothing would remain of the orc fortress but rubble. This would be the first official victory of their campaign and the beginning of their invasion into the territories of the Wanted Kingdom. "Fascinating, truly fascinating," Asmodeus said as he casually summoned a bone wall to block a slab of granite, which had been blown all the way from the fortress walls. "Master, I'd like to have one of those magic cannons to tinker with." "We'll see if we can nab one or two of them later," Lux replied in a casual manner as he summoned his Thunder Ward King, Jed. "Draven, you already know what to do, right?" "Yes, Master," the Shadow Lord that hid inside Lux's shadow answered. "I hear and obey." A moment later, Lux's shadow moved away in order to carry out his master's order. Lux smiled at the fleeting shadow and wished the newest member of his covenant good luck in what he was about to do. "Let's go, Asmodeus," Lux commanded. "This fortress is done for." Asmodeus nodded his head before summoning a skeleton warhorse that he could mount. The Archlich then gave the dead orcs a sidelong glance and sighed in his heart. If only he could have his way, he would definitely pick up some of the bodies to use for his experiments. However, Lux firmly told him not to because he didn't want to sour his relationship with the Blackrock clan due to the temptation of greed. "Ride," Lady Aviana commanded as she led the retreat of the orc army. "To Lorgak Kur." The orcs roared in acknowledgement. All of them hoped that when the human armies entered the mountains of their home turf, it would be their turn to make them suffer losses and retreat back to their own kingdom. Perhaps it was only Lux and Asmodeus who didn't feel sad as they left the fortress. For them, this wasn't a big deal because they were merely there to observe the war between the two sides. Unknown to the tens of thousands of orc who were making a hasty retreat, the red-headed teenager and the Archlich were busy discussing things that would give them casualties through telepathy. "Our skeleton grand cannons can reach their location, right?" Lux asked his strategist as they followed behind the orcs. "Yes, Master," Asmodeus replied. "However, it will be best if we don't show this to our enemies right now. Although the orcs have lost a fortress, their determination to fight is still burning. Perhaps this flame has now become a great bonfire due to the rage they are feeling in their hearts." Before Lux could even reply, a loud explosion suddenly erupted behind them. The grand spell had finally activated and unleashed a giant fireball, similar to a small sun, which descended to the orc fortress, obliterating it completely. "Nice fireworks," Asmodeus muttered subconsciously as he looked at the blazing inferno behind him that created a giant mushroom cloud that rose toward the sky. Discover EU chapters at novelby.co. This casual comment of his earned him hateful growls and glares from the orc warriors that were riding beside him. Instead of being afraid, the Archlich simply shrugged his shoulders as if it wasn't a big deal. Clearly, the Archlich didn't give a hoot about what the orcs were feeling right now, which made Lux smile wryly. As the orcs retreated, the Hakka dynasty's army celebrated their victory, raising their morale. "Ha ha ha. Those orcs are nothing. Are these really the powerful orcs of the Blackrock clan? More like the cowardly orcs of the Blackrock clan. Ha ha ha. What an easy win. The great general really knows what he is doing." With this, we will be able to conquer the lands of the wanted kingdom smoothly and without fail. All the soldiers were in a good mood, and even the high rankers couldn't help but smile at the outcome of their first campaign in the wanted kingdom. They had already expected this outcome, but seeing it become a reality made them feel as if all of their preparations finally bore fruit. 3 hours later, the human army finally marched toward the giant crater where the orc fortress once stood. White smoke was still oozing off from the ground, but this was easily dispersed by the high rankers of the army. After passing through the giant crater, the soldiers finally stepped foot in the territory of the wanted kingdom, making them feel elated. They continued their march for half a day before Great General Garrett signaled everyone to take a short rest. After giving his orders, the hunting parties began to forage for food supplies in the surroundings. It was at that moment that they came across several stone statues in the places they passed. Great General Garrett had already told them that these statues were very common in the wanted kingdom. The locals made them as a tribute to the spirits which could be found all over the mysterious kingdom. Guardian spirits, one of the scouts laughed as he looked at the statue in front of him. "This is what I think of your stupid spirits." A moment later, the sound of water hitting stone was heard as the scout pissed at the statue in front of him. The scout hummed in a good mood because he was able to relieve himself and mock the spirits of the wanted kingdom at the same time. Just as he was about to finish emptying his bladder, something black appeared in his vision. A moment later, he felt a stinging pain in his chest. The scout was unable to shout in pain because a shadowy hand blocked his lips. A minute later, another scout appeared in the area and saw his comrade adjusting his lightweight padded armor. "Is everything fine, brother?" the scout asked his comrade who was standing in front of the statue that was wet with piss. "Are you done desecrating the spirits of the wanted kingdom?" "You call this desecrating?" the scout, who was adjusting his armor earlier, replied. "Wait till you see me stabbing an orc in the face. You will see the true meaning of desecration." "Ha ha ha. We'll have our chance, brother. Just hang tight until we catch up to those cowardly orcs." "Aye. We will definitely catch up to them sooner or later." The two scouts then left the scene, leaving the statue behind. A minute later, the hand of the statue moved and wiped the piss from its face. Its sinister visage briefly appeared before turning back into a statue that could do no harm to anyone. While the Hakka dynasty was already preparing their men for a full-scale invasion of the wanted kingdom, a certain red-headed teenager was busy laying down his chess pieces that would strike at the right moment and give Great General Garrett a surprise he would never forget. "Master, are you sure about this?" Asmodeus asked as he ordered his steel golems to dig into the ground. "Shouldn't we help the Blackrock clan resist the Hakka dynasty's army?" Lux, who had summoned his doppelgangers, who then summoned the skeleton gangbangers and the steel golems, shook his head. "Even if we were with them, it would still be useless," Lux replied. "The orcs are outgunned and outmatched by their opponents. Sooner or later, they're going to retreat back here to the capital city. So, there is no use staying with them. We'll just be wasting our time and effort there." The half-elf then looked at the ground where Eiko was sharing her senses with him. Eiko, can you and your clones dig a little deeper?" "Huh. Good girl. Okay, that's deep enough. You can hollow that place and make sure that it is spacious enough." "On." When the orcs retreated, Lux and Asmodeus didn't bother stopping by the mountains of Lorgak Kor, which the orcs planned to use as a natural fortress to halt the advance of the Hakka dynasty's army. Instead, he headed straight back to the capital city of the orcs and began to lay out a surprise for their enemies. Although Asmodeus acted as if he didn't know what Lux was planning to do, he silently gave his master 2 thumbs up in his heart. "Master, you're starting to think ahead." Asmodeus smiled as he ordered his own undead warriors to speed up their digging. "This is good." Truth be told, Asmodeus wanted to corner the Blackrock clan until they had no other choice but to rely on his master for help. But without telling that to Lux, it seemed that the half-elf was thinking of the exact same thing. Both of them understood that the orcs were very proud, and helping them right now would not allow them to feel as if the very existence of their clan was threatened. Only when the orcs knew true despair would they understand how the half-elf could tilt the tide of battle in their favor. While everyone was busy digging, the half-elf suddenly chuckled as if he heard something very funny. Asmodeus, who was paying close attention to what his master did, walked towards him and inquired what the red-headed teenager found funny. Draven succeeded in infiltrating the ranks of the Hakka dynasty's army, Lux explained with a smile on his face. If he manages to achieve the mission I assigned to him, then we will gain a lot of spoils in this war in more ways than one. He is really amazing. Asmodeus praised their new ally. His ability allows him to infiltrate any organization. As long as he doesn't do anything to stand out, the enemy wouldn't know that someone is spying on them under their noses. Lux nodded in agreement. Also, there's one more thing that I need to share with you. The half-elf was no longer laughing, and a serious expression appeared on his face. The Hakka dynasty has no intention of crossing the mountains of Lorgak-Kor, Lux stated. Asmodeus frowned after hearing his master's words. If they don't plan to cross it, are they planning to go around it? The red-headed teenager shook his head, which made Asmodeus gasp in shock. Why, you can't mean that? Yes, Asmodeus. The Hakka dynasty plans to obliterate the mountains that are blocking their way with the magic cannons, as well as the grand spell. 50 years ago, the orcs used the Lorgak-Kor mountains to slowly kill the invading army of the Hakka dynasty. Because of this, they didn't have enough force to mount a proper offensive against the entirety of the Wanted Kingdom and were forced to retreat. Great General Garrett had no intention of repeating the mistakes that had been made in the past, so he decided to brute force his way through, even if he had to deal with an entire mountain range. But how? Asmodeus replied. Although their magic cannons are strong, it is impossible for them to obliterate entire mountains unless all of their high-rankers who specialized in long-range attacks work alongside the magic cannons and the grand spell. Lux finished what his strategist was about to say with a bitter smile. We should dig faster. I'm afraid that we only have 2 days at most to finish our preparations. Asmodeus nodded and urged his undead army to speed up their work. Their only saving grace was that they were commanding legions of the undead, who didn't know the meaning of fatigue and exhaustion. Lorgak-Kor. This is madness. Tanabur smashed his fist on the ground as explosions erupted all around him. They planned to destroy the entire mountain range? Barca, Lady Aviana, and Oreg were just as surprised as him as the Hakka dynasty launched a barrage of long-range attacks in order to destroy the mountain little by little. The power of their magic cannons has increased exponentially, Lady Aviana stated. Before Lux left, he said that the quality of the beast cores used to power those weapons of war would determine their performance. I'm guessing that they are now using Deimos and Argonaut-ranked cores in order to raise the firepower of their magic cannons, so they can obliterate this natural fortress that we rely on. Bastards! Oreg gnashed his teeth in anger. We are like sitting ducks here and we can't do anything but accept the bombardment they are firing at us. Right now, only Mogazer and Baranar were able to launch a counteroffensive against their enemies. Similar to what the enemy was doing, Baranar was using high-ranking spells to cast elemental attacks against the faraway army. Mogazer was doing the same, but they were having very little success with all of their attempts. The high-rankers, who specialized in long-range combat, were also attacking the mountains, making the ground under the orcs' feet tremble. Mogazer's and Baranar's attempts at a counterattack were easily blocked by their high-ranking enemies, who had already predicted what the orcs were going to do next. This doesn't feel like we're fighting powerful orcs, but mere apostles who are just starting to understand how to fight, Ronan commented as he blocked Mogazer's long-ranged attack with his shield. I wish all our campaigns were this easy. The other high-rankers, whose tasks were to block Mogazer's and Baranar's attacks, nodded in agreement. Only their great General Garrett felt like something was amiss. Although the war was progressing smoothly, and they were able to overpower their enemies with very little resistance, his guts were telling him that something was off. Just where is this uneasy feeling coming from? Great General Garrett thought as he scanned his surroundings. Am I just over-imagining things? The great general of the Hakka dynasty wasn't paranoid. However, as someone who had managed to reach his rank, his battle instincts had been refined over the countless campaigns that he had been a part of in the past. Whenever he had this nagging feeling at the back of his head, something would happen that would endanger his life. However, since he had the unique ability of future sight, these attempts on his life were easily thwarted. He had the ability to see a few seconds ahead in the future, but that didn't mean that he knew everything that would happen in the war. His ability would only activate once he was being targeted by someone or something, granting him enough time to dodge, deflect, parry, or avoid the attack completely. Because of this, he had gained the title Untouchable. No one was capable of defeating him in one-on-one battles because of this cheat-like ability. The source of this content N/O/V/L by N. But for some reason, the feeling of anxiety only grew the more the Blackrock clan was being cornered. Is this feeling because of the Blackrock clan's desperate last struggle? Great General Garrett thought as beads of cold sweat formed on his forehead. Will their final counterattack be that deadly? The great general of the Hakka dynasty didn't know the answer to this question. However, hundreds of meters away from him, an engineer was busy clearing out the shattered remains of a beast core from the power supply of a magic cannon so that he could replace it with a new one. Since everyone was busy looking at the mountains that were already covered in thick, white smoke, no one noticed the shadowy glint inside his eyes. The engineer then gave the smoke-filled mountain a sidelong glance as the corner of his lips rose up into a smile. A day later, Lady Aviana once again ordered a full retreat after seeing that their current situation was unsalvageable. The Numb Orcs, who were now feeling unsure of their future, followed their orc chieftain as they left Lorgak Kur behind. This was a very difficult decision on their part, knowing that once their enemies passed through the mountain range, it would only take them 4 to 5 days in order to reach their capital city, Liderbraf. All of them knew that they would have to once again face the difficult choice of either staying to fight or flee like what they had been doing ever since the Hakka dynasty's army launched their invasion. For a proud race like the Orcs, each defeat weighed heavily on their hearts, leaving them feeling agitated. Lady Aviana understood this full well, and she was afraid that when it was finally time to defend their capital city from the invaders, Barca and the rest might initiate a suicide charge at their enemies in order to kill as many as they could before they drew their last breath. Such a situation was something she didn't want to see happen, but she had a feeling that even her orders wouldn't be enough to stop the Orcs from trying to preserve what was left of their dignity and honor. What's the use of honor and dignity when you're dead? Lady Aviana sighed in her heart as she led her people back to their capital city. Is this really the end of our clan? Lady Aviana was quite unwilling to accept such a fate. When the Hakka dynasty had mobilized their army to invade their lands, she knew that the battle with them would be difficult. However, she never expected that they wouldn't even have the chance to exchange blows with their enemies aside from the mock invasion that Ronan had initiated at the very start of the war in their first stronghold. Barca's eyes were bloodshot as he glanced at the smoking mountain range behind them. Just like his wife had anticipated, Barca was nearing his limit. He was still able to force himself to flee because he knew that the Dryads of East Haven would be waiting for them in their capital city. He hoped that they would be able to do something with the help of their reinforcements when they make their last stand at their capital city, which they had built with their blood, sweat, and tears. A mile outside the capital city of Liderbraf. So, it finally happened. Luck sighed as he gazed in the direction of the Lorgak Kur Mountains. They lasted a bit longer than expected as Modius replied, "Master, we still need a day or two to finish our preparations. Do you think we can make it?" Lux pondered a bit before nodding his head. Since Eiko, her clones, Nora, and Cora are the only ones working on the underground tunnels, it's only natural for them to take a while to finish them. However, I am confident that we will be able to make it in time. The Archlich nodded his head before looking up at the sky. Gerhardt and Cephas were busy flattening the land using wind and gravity magic. They were doing their best to hide all traces of the digging that Lux and his subordinates had been doing for the past few days. Truth be told, they were shocked when Lux told them about the outcome of the battle between the Hakka dynasty and the Blackrock clan. Although the red-headed teenager already explained how the battle took place, they still couldn't comprehend just how devastating their enemies' weapons of war were. "Master, how's your work over there?" Lux asked Randolph through their guild chat. "Will you be able to reach the quota in 2 days?" "2 days is impossible. Give me 2.5 and I'll do my best," Randolph replied grumpily. "Okay, that's fine," Lux commented. "Grandma Annie, how is everything going on your side?" Grandma Annie's reply came a few minutes later. She was busy doing the task that Lux asked of her with the use of alchemy, and because of this, she was unable to divert her attention away. "We have enough ingredients for the production," Grandma Annie replied. "This is the first time I'm making this. However, the recipe you gave me is simply amazing, but scary at the same time. If we continue our pace, we will be able to finish the quota in a day. The doppelganger skill has saved me a lot of time." "Great," Lux said with satisfaction. "I'm glad that it is very helpful to you, Grandma." After making sure that his master, Randolph, and Grandma Annie were able to meet their deadline, the half-elf closed his eyes in order to communicate with the plague wing gargoyles that he had placed in strategic positions within the territory of the Blackrock clan. Their main goal was to observe the enemy's army's advance, as well as eliminate the enemy scouts, who decided to go solo on their missions. Their ability to ambush the unwary victims proved to be successful, and all the scouts they targeted died without ever alerting the main army of their demise. Of course, the disappearances of these scouts didn't go unnoticed. Because of this, the scouting parties were banned from going solo, decreasing the number of victims that fell prey to the harmless statues that would often change their location, depending on the situation. Finally, on the third day, Lady Aviana and the orcs returned to their capital city, Vist and Velbund, CM for new updates. Those who had remained in the city looked at their returning warriors with anxiety. They didn't greet their orc chieftain with shouts of victory or roars of triumph. A single glance at their brethren's defeated faces was enough to tell them how their defense against the invading army ended. And it filled their hearts with fear. "The spirits of East Haven greet you," Orc Chieftain, the Dryad Queen, Cornelia, greeted Lady Aviana. "Cornelia, you came personally?" Lady Aviana was touched in seeing the ruler of the Dryads in their capital city. "Yes," Cornelia replied. "However, even with us here, I'm afraid that we might not be able to hold back the invaders. The spirits told me what happened to Lorgakkur. Our foes are simply terrifying. It makes me think that simply staying in our territories has limited our growth, while the outside world has developed these strange and powerful weapons of war, which makes my heart shudder. Now I can understand why you resorted to recruiting a necromancer into your ranks. Desperate times call for desperate measures." Lady Aviana gave her friend a wry smile as her gaze landed on the red-headed teenager, who was happily eating a roasted chicken leg in the distance. With just a glance, they could tell that the half-elf wasn't even feeling the least bit anxious like they were. Sensing that people were looking in his direction, Lux turned his head and smiled at them. He even waved his hand as if telling the orc chieftain and the Dryad Queen to join him for lunch, which gave the two ladies a strong urge to kick him out of the fortress and make him disappear from their sight. 2 hours after the orcs returned to their capital city, Asmodeus asked his master to talk in private. "Is there something wrong, Asmodeus?" Lux asked as soon as he closed the door of his room behind him. "Master, I have a bold proposal to make," Asmodeus replied as the embers on his eyes shone in a devilish glint. "I didn't think of this before, but after seeing the depressed expressions of the orcs who have returned to the city, a plan suddenly formed inside my head. Forget about the transcendent flames. If we can make this work, then we will profit a lot from this war." Lux could feel the evil enthusiasm in Asmodeus' voice, as if he was a kid about to play a prank on his friends. "Tell me what you have in mind," Lux said as he sat down on a chair. The Archlich nodded his head and excitedly told his master about the plan that he had just thought of an hour ago. Lux's expression gradually changed as he listened to Asmodeus' words. The Archlich was like a devil tempting the half-elf into committing a sinful act with the promise of great riches and rewards. After listening to his strategist's plan, the half-elf couldn't stop himself from taking in a cold breath due to how bold it was. "What do you think, Master?" Asmodeus asked with a smile. "I think you are crazy," Lux replied as he clenched his fist. "But I like this kind of crazy. The only problem is if it will work." "Master, timing is important. As long as we time it right, we can make it happen." "Has anyone ever told you that you are evil?" "Kukuka. Thanks for the compliment, Master. As long as it benefits you, I don't mind being called evil." Inside the room, two people started to laugh as they discussed in detail on how to execute Asmodeus' daring plan that made the half-elf feel as if the payoff was worth the risk he was going to take. If they succeed, they would no longer need to worry about the transcendent flames, because both the Hakka dynasty and the Blackrock clan would make him the biggest winner in this war. Dozens of miles away from the capital city of the orcs. What do you think? Will the orcs launch a suicide attack to defend their capital city? Or run away like the dogs they are? Ronan asked Great General Garrett, who was sat on the back of his war horse as they continued their march deeper into the Blackrock clan's territory. Great General Garrett didn't reply right away. Instead, he pondered the possibility of the orcs betting everything they had in one last suicide charge against their army. They might make their last stand in their capital city, or they might flee, Great General Garrett replied after organizing his thoughts. However, knowing the orcs' mentality, they would rather die than run forever. Their pride won't allow it. "Her pride, is it?" Ronan smirked. "Well, I've been itching for a fight as well. It's boring to just protect the magic cannons all day." Your F4ite stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. You shouldn't underestimate the orcs. We wouldn't have lost 50 years ago if they were easy to defeat. True. But that won't change the fact that they're no match against us. Great General Garrett didn't refute Ronan's words. Truth be told, even if they did a frontal clash with the orcs, he was confident that they would win. However, the only thing he couldn't guarantee was the number of casualties on their side if that were to happen. "The nagging feeling in my head is still there," Great General Garrett thought as he gazed in the direction of the capital city of the orcs. "It has been steadily growing more intense as we near Litterbraff." The Great General tried to shrug off the feeling many times, but it didn't want to leave him alone. 2 more days, Great General Garrett thought. We will reach their capital city in 2 days. Their march would have taken longer if they had trekked through the mountain range. However, since they destroyed it, they managed to cut their travel time by half. His army's morale was also at its peak because they had won 2 consecutive campaigns without losing too many comrades. All of them shared Ronan's wishes to clash against the orcs and finally get a piece of the action. But Garrett was hesitant to order a direct confrontation because the Blackrock clan weren't the only enemies they were going to face. They would have to deal with the other factions that lived inside the Wanted Kingdom. Fortunately, our allies are keeping the other pillars busy, Great General Garrett thought. Because of this, they were unable to send any reinforcements to the orcs, allowing us to overpower them with our sheer numbers. The Wanted Kingdom was one big pie that had long been coveted by their neighbors, with the exception of the Kingdom of Guelevin. Its rich, fertile lands that were brimming with ancient power were simply too hard to resist, so because of this, an alliance of those who shared a common goal was formed. Their intention was to split up the Wanted Kingdom's pillars to make it easier for them to conquer their lands. However, since the Hakka dynasty had prepared for this invasion for years, their forces were much more prepared and more well-equipped than their allies, who jumped at the opportunity to join them in their massive invasion. "Father, I will soon avenge you," Great General Garrett thought as he held the amulet on his neck and rubbed his thumb over its surface. "I'll offer the orc chieftain's head to your grave as a gift when I return from this war victorious." 2 days later, the sound of war drums reverberated in the surroundings as the orcs prepared to defend their capital city to the death. Lady Aviana's worst fears had come to pass, and there was no longer a way to stop Barca and the other orc warlords from initiating a suicide charge against their enemies. The orc blacksmiths had worked nonstop over the past 2 days, forging shields that would be supplied to each of their brethren who would lay down their lives to preserve their clan's honor. Lux looked at these orcs, who had surprisingly calm expressions on their faces. They were the faces that didn't fear anything, even death, and it made him respect them more in his heart. As he was taking a stroll in the fortress and watching all of the orcs sharpening their weapons, he found Baranar standing on the ramparts and staring off in the distance. "Lux, when I die, don't revive me, okay?" Baranar said as soon as he felt Lux's presence behind him. "If you do, I'll kill you." The orc great shaman didn't even bother to turn around to look at the half-elf and continued to gaze in the distance. At the edge of the horizon, the flags of the Hakka dynasty fluttered, signifying that it would only take them a few hours before they arrived in the capital city of the orcs. "Very well," Lux replied. "Are you going to join the suicide charge as well?" "Yes," Baranar replied. "I've been itching to try the new ability that I gained after I absorbed the abyssal core you traded to me. I'll make sure to make them feel pain beyond their wildest dreams." A sinister smile appeared on Baranar's face as he gazed at the approaching army in the distance. "Don't worry, I have no intention of dying," Baranar stated. "The Dryads are here, and we have thought of a way to counter their grand spell. All we need to worry about is their magic cannons. If we can nullify their damage, that will force the enemy to fight us in close quarters. When that happens, we will show them what it means to fight against an orc." Lux crossed his arms over his chest as he, too, gazed at the approaching army in the distance. Unknown to Baranar, the half-elf was wishing the Hakka dynasty's army would hurry up and start their siege against the Blackrock clan. Only when the two forces clashed would he be able to execute the plan that he and Asmodeus had concocted, which would allow him to gain the ability to negotiate with the proud orcs, who were eager to start a slaughter. The ground shook as loud explosions spread in the surroundings. Just as they had done during their past two campaigns, the Hakka dynasty's army used their magic cannons to obliterate the walls of the orc city. At least, that was what they planned, but it didn't go as smoothly as their previous two battles. The Dryad's queen and her elite sisters had joined the battle, and their nature magic created gigantic vines which wrapped around the orc city, protecting it from the long-ranged magical bombardment. Ronan, who was guarding one of the magical cannons, clicked his tongue as he gazed at the head engineer, who was supervising the bombardment operation. "Why are the magical cannons' attacks considerably weaker than last time?" Ronan complained. "They should have been able to blast a hole in those giant vines by now. You're even using Argonaut-ranked cores. Why is it taking so long?" The head engineer gave the high-ranker an apologetic gaze as he explained the current situation of their long-ranged weapons of war. "We overtaxed the magical cannons when we obliterated the Lorgat Core Mountain range a few days ago," the head engineer replied. "Although I did maintenance on them, their performance has significantly decreased due to wear and tear. If you give me a few days, I will be able to make them return to their peak performance." "I don't want to hear your excuses," Ronan shouted, which made the head engineer cower in fear. "You only had one job, and you can't even do it right." The other engineers, who were responsible for operating the magical cannons, could only lower their heads as they clenched their fists in frustration. Truth be told, they really didn't know why their magical cannons' performance had significantly weakened. They had done all necessary maintenance, and yet its performance was nowhere near its optimum condition when the war started. All of them were using Argonaut-ranked beast cores, allowing them to create magical cannonballs, whose destructive power was similar to the full-powered blow of an Argonaut-ranked beast. Argonaut-ranked monsters were extremely strong, and their attacks could easily destroy a city's defensive walls. Because of this, Ronan and the other high-rankers were very displeased with the current state of their war. "Argonaut-ranked cores aren't cabbages," Ronan spat on the ground. "Switch back to Deimos-ranked cores." "Why yes, sir." The head engineer quickly ordered his subordinates to remove the Argonaut-ranked beast cores from the magical cannons before they broke apart. Ronan scoffed before gazing at the sky where the grand spell was being formed. However, this tactic of theirs was also not going as smoothly as they intended because the Dryads were countering their grand spell with their own grand spell that specialized in magic nullification. "Stop the magical bombardment," Great General Garrett ordered. "Bring out the destroyer." Ronan, who heard the Great General's words, frowned, but didn't say any words of protest. It seems that we greatly underestimated the orcs and their allies, Ronan thought as he watched the army move aside to create a path for the 10-meter-tall war machine to pass through them. The destroyer was a special weapon of war that could only be used thrice during the entirety of their campaign. This weapon was powered by an Empyrean-ranked world boss core that they managed to get after some great hardships a decade ago. The head engineer gazed at the weapon that was made by the wizards of the magic tower of the Hakka dynasty. It was a magic weapon that allowed them to gather their magical spells and amplify their effects, which could reach the power of a grand spell before it was fired over a long distance. The orcs, who were unaware of the newest threat to their lives, cheered as they watched the Hakka dynasty's attempts to destroy their capital city fail. Ha ha ha. Serves these bastards right. Oreg raised his fist high up in the air as he mocked the Hakka dynasty's army. Only relying on these cheap tricks to win. What a bunch of cowards. Lux, who was also observing the battle from his vantage point, casually sipped some fruit juice. Pa. You want some too, Eiko? Okay. The baby slime happily drank from a straw as Lux continued to watch the battle with a smile on his face. His other party members were with him and were busy playing cards as if they weren't in the middle of a war. Since the orcs were in a good mood, they turned a blind eye to Lux's and his companions' antics as they waited for the moment to strike. Master, the Hakka dynasty is about to use one of their trump cards, Draven reported. If you're near the city walls, I suggest you go away as far as you can. This weapon looks very dangerous. Understood, Lux replied. We will retreat to the rear of the city. Lux signaled for his people to leave and head to safety. However, he couldn't bear to not tell the orcs of the impending danger, so he hurriedly went to tell Baranar of the weapon that the Hakka dynasty had mobilized. Follow the latest novels n/Felbund.com. The orc chieftain, as well as the other orc warlords, were gathered on the same spot, so Lux took this opportunity to inform everyone of his latest discovery. The Hakka dynasty is about to use a weapon of war called the Destroyer, Lux stated. I don't know how strong it is, but my spy within the enemy's army told me that it could unleash an attack that is equivalent to a grand spell. It would be best if you order the orcs who are near the walls to evacuate for the time being. It is possible that all of them will be annihilated if they don't leave their posts now. Oreg snorted after hearing Lux's words. What nonsense are you talking about? Oreg looked down on the half-elf who only reached his waist. You have no authority here, half-elf. Don't order us around. I'm not ordering anyone, Lux replied calmly. I'm just informing you of what is about to come. If you don't want to believe me, then so be it. I only warned all of you out of the goodness of my heart. Eiko, who was perched on top of Lux's head, glared at Oreg and opened her mouth to silently call him a F***er. Lux wasn't able to see Eiko's antics because he didn't bother to wait for any of the orcs to reply as he hastily left the scene. He considered the Blackrock clan to be his acquaintances because of the bonds they shared in the dungeon of Dominion long ago. However, that didn't mean that he would allow himself to be ridiculed by the orcs he was trying to help. The orc chieftain and the dryad queen looked at the half-elves retreating back with calm expressions on their faces. Just like Oreg, they doubted the authenticity of Lux's words. Suddenly, the great orc shaman who had remained silent made his opinion known. Let's listen to him, Baranar said. If what he said is true, then many of our brethren will die without knowing how they died. Baranar, you're going to believe that child's nonsense? Oreg glared at the great orc shaman. Have you lost your mind? Baranar shrugged off Oreg's comment as he shifted his gaze to his orc chieftain who commanded their forces. Even if there is a small chance that what he said is true, then we should consider it to preserve the lives of our brethren, Baranar stated. Right now, the magical vines of the Dryads are shielding our city from their magic cannons. Our forces standing on the ramparts have nothing to do but watch our enemies from a distance. We won't lose anything by having them retreat until we confirm the authenticity of Lux's words. Lady Aviana stared long and hard at the great orc shaman before asking him a question. Are you willing to trust that half-elf with your life, Baranar? Lady Aviana inquired. Yes, Baranar replied in a heartbeat. I trust him with my life. Flamma, who was standing beside his mother, looked at the great orc shaman whom he respected the most. Although he didn't like Lux after suffering a loss, he had to acknowledge that the half-elf was able to defeat him in a duel he started. Also, he wanted to believe that the one who triumphed over him was telling the truth. Because of this, he decided to voice his opinion as well. "Mother, let's trust that half-elf once," Flamma commented. "We won't lose anything if we do." "Even you are on his side, Flamma?" Lady Aviana asked with a frown. "Yes, Mother." "Fine. I'll listen to you and Baranar just this once. Order all the warriors on the ramparts to pull back." After receiving the order, Baranar immediately summoned his elite spirit warriors to inform everyone near the wall to back away to safety. Although everyone was surprised by their sudden orders, all of them obeyed without any questions. They had seen how the magical cannons had decimated their fortress walls in the past, and this knowledge allowed them to heed their superiors' orders. Just as all the orcs had abandoned the city walls, the Dryad Queen, who was standing beside Lady Aviana, coughed out green blood. A second later, a powerful explosion shook the entire city, creating a shockwave that obliterated their city walls and turned the orcs who weren't able to evacuate fast enough into meat paste. Lady Aviana, Barca, Flamma, the orc warlords, and the Dryad Queen, along with her subordinates, were also blown away by the impact and crashed towards the houses within the city. Although injured, the orc chieftain raised her head and looked in horror at the destruction around her. Not only were their fortifications destroyed, but a part of their city had been completely obliterated from the destructive attack that came out of nowhere. "It's over," Lady Aviana muttered as she clenched her fist so hard that blood seeped out of her palm. Barca gave a hateful roar as he stood up from the ground. The other orc warlords, as well as the orc warriors, answered his call. They would no longer run like cowards. Even in the face of death, they would fight till the bitter end. As the orcs howled their war cries, a red-headed teenager walked up towards the orcs who were planning to do a suicide charge. Baranar, who always paid close attention to Lux's aura, turned his head to look at the half-elf who was walking in their direction. It was not only the great orc shaman who turned around to look at the approaching half-elf, whose steady steps emitted a confidence that surpassed an Empyrean-ranked alpha monster. "Hey, do you guys want to win this war?" Lux asked as a magic cannonball landed dozens of meters away from him, setting the houses it hit on fire. More magic cannonballs rained down upon them, setting the capital city of the orcs ablaze. Even so, Lux's steps remained steady, as if he had everything under his control. Only when he reached Lady Aviana, who was kneeling on the ground, did he stop and offer his hand. "I have a way to win this war," Lux stated. "But are you willing to pay the price for it?" The orc chieftain raised her head to look at the half-elf who was on the same eye level as her. "Even at this time you want the twin flames?" Lady Aviana smiled bitterly. "Fine, you can have it. As long as you have a way that will turn this situation around, I will give it to you." Barca and the other orc warlords looked at Lux with solemn expressions on their faces. Aside from Baranar, they never took Lux seriously because he was just an initiate-ranked half-elf who would easily die from a single slap of their hand. Contrary to what they were expecting, the half-elf only shook his head as he pointed his finger at Lady Aviana, Barca, Baranar, Oreg, Tanabur, Mogazer, and Flamma. A moment later, several rows of text appeared in front of the orcs, which made them gasp in shock. "Lux von Kaiser has sent an invitation for you to join the mythical guild, Heaven's Gate. Do you wish to accept?" "Yes/no." Lady Aviana's body shuddered as she looked at the notification in front of her before shifting her gaze to the half-elf, who was looking back at her with a confident smile on his face. "This is my condition for helping you in this war," Lux declared. "If you accept it, I promise to help you drive the invaders away from your lands." Asmodeus, who stood behind his master, laughed internally. This was the bold plan that he had proposed to Lux. The Archlich was well aware that what they were doing was a gamble. However, if they timed it right, their chances of making the orcs agree would increase. Now that Lux had revealed his identity as the guild master of the only mythical guild in the world to the higher-ups of the Blackrock clan, the turning point to change the outcome of the war was about to begin. Several months ago, the tolling of the bell echoed throughout every corner of Solais and Elysium, announcing the name of the first ever mythical guild to the world. Yes, the name of that guild is none other than Heaven's Gate. Days following the announcement, all the powers of the world were mobilized to uncover the identity of the mythical guild's guild master, locate any of its members, or discover the whereabouts of its headquarters. Despite their efforts, none of them succeeded. Months later, while the initial buzz around the mythical guild waned, its name still lingered in everyone's mind. Even the Blackrock clan from the Wanted Kingdom had discussed this matter in the past, believing that whoever founded that guild must be someone blessed by the heavens. However, for monsters like them, joining a guild wasn't a priority. They were the proud orcs of the Blackrock clan, and they didn't need to join any guilds in the first place. Truth be told, monsters could not join guilds. And orcs were certainly monsters. However, a mythical guild was different. Its guild master had the power to invite anyone regardless of their race. It didn't matter what their race was. Whether they be humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, kobolds, or monsters, they could still join. And right now, the name of that mythical guild flashed in front of the orcs' faces, rendering them speechless beyond words. "If you join my guild, I will assist you in winning this war," Lux said as the spells of their enemies descended upon the capital city of the orcs, engulfing everything they touched with blazing flames. "So, do you want to win?" Lux asked as he scanned the faces of Lady Aviana, Barca, Flamma, Baranar, Oreg, Tanaber, and Mogazer. "Or do you want to die in vain? You better decide quickly, or your clan will cease to exist." Lady Aviana slowly stood up as she gazed at the half-elf with a solemn expression on her face. "Is it possible for us to win if we join your guild?" Lady Aviana asked. "Do you have a way to turn this situation around?" Lux nodded. "I do." The orc chieftain surveyed her surroundings, which were now covered in flames. The non-combatants of the orc race, including the elderly and the children, had been taken to a safe location away from the capital city. All that remained were the orcs who wished to fight for their homeland and make their enemy know that, even in the face of death, they would die fighting. Lady Aviana then turned around to look at his husband and son, who was looking back at her with calm expressions on their faces. Even though explosions were happening around them, they stood their ground and simply waited for their chieftain to make her decision. "Lux, if you're lying to us, I swear that I will haunt you even after I die," Lady Aviana declared as she raised her hand to press on the notification in front of her. "The Blackrock clan's honor and dignity aren't toys for you to play with. Congratulations! You are now a member of the Guild Heaven's Gate." Lady Aviana nodded at Barca, Flamma, and the 4 orc warlords as a way to tell them that she had accepted Lux's condition. Barca and Flamma accepted the guild invitation without saying a word. They had nothing to lose at this point, so staking everything on one last gamble wouldn't make any difference. "Brat, you'd better uphold your end of the bargain," Baranar said as he, too, accepted the guild invitation. "I will haunt you for life if you lie to us." Oreg, Tanaber, and Mogazer also accepted the guild invitation because it was the will of their orc chieftain. Seeing that he had achieved his goal, Lux was about to tell them his strategy when he heard several notification sounds inside his head. A moment later, several rows of text appeared in front of him, which made the half-elf's eyes widen in shock. The Path of Myths 2. Mythical Guild, Hidden Quest completed. Quest: recruiting high-ranking members into your guild completed. This is a chain quest. As you continue to grow your guild, you will continue to receive bonuses and great rewards. Recruitment bonus rewards unlocked. New members that have been successfully recruited into the guild will gain a boost to their stat points depending on their current rank. All new members, and those that joined long ago, will gain bonuses depending on their respective ranks. The bonus stat points will also apply to all beast companions and mounts that belong to the guild members. If they leave the guild, this reward will disappear. Initiate rank and below equals 2,000 free stats points. Irankers/Daimos rank equals 5,000 free stats points. D and C Rankers/Argonaut rank equals 20,000 free stats points. B and a ranker / dreadnought rank equals 50,000 free stats points. S and SS ranker / Empyrean rank equals 100,000 free stats points. SSS rankers and Saints / Calamity rank equals 1 million free stats points. Bonus rewards. The Guildmaster special skill, Heaven's Call, will be upgraded to Heaven's Call EX. Heaven's Call EX. This skill can be used once a day to summon all of your guild members to instantly be right beside you. Requirements for using Heaven's Call EX. The Guildmaster must be standing inside a village, town, or city. The Guildmaster must be standing inside his own guild headquarters. Members have the right to accept or reject the summoning of their Guildmaster. Those who reject the summons will remain where they are. Heaven's Call EX. Second ability. Twice a month, the Guildmaster can summon all of his guild members to his side, regardless of his location. This skill will activate even if the Guildmaster isn't inside a village, town, or city. Members have the right to accept or reject the summoning of their Guildmaster. Those who reject the summons will remain where they are. Exclusive Lord of the Dead Profession bonus rewards. Lux von Kaiser had learned the skill, Summon Corpse God. This skill will automatically be upgraded to Summon Corpse God EX. Due to the skill evolution, EX, skill, fin the new SD ubbles on n//velbend, com. Summon Corpse God EX. Summon a corpse god whose stats will always be double that of Lux von Kaiser. This summon's main purpose is to protect Lux von Kaiser and act as his armor against any incoming attack. As long as the corpse god is alive, Lux von Kaiser will not receive any kind of damage whatsoever. Corpse God will automatically appear if any attack or ability is about to hit Lux von Kaiser. The Corpse God will also summon ancient mummies, whose rank will always be 2 ranks below Lux von Kaiser on its own. Maximum number of ancient mummies that can be summoned at any given time is 200. All attacks made by the Corpse God are infused with Abyssal Touch. Before Lux could even comprehend what just happened, his guild members, as well as his named creatures, immediately gained additional stats points, which boosted their strength drastically. Barca, who was an Empyrean-ranked alpha beast, gasped in shock because he immediately felt the surge of strength that washed over his body. By Macha's name, just what is going on? Barca looked at his hands in amazement because he never felt as powerful as he did now. Is this the effect of joining your guild? It was not only Barca who was amazed at the immediate changes in their bodies. Lady Aviana, Flamma, and the orc warlords couldn't believe what had happened as soon as they joined Lux's guild. Is this the power of a mythical guild? Lady Aviana looked at the half-elf, who had the same shocked expression as her. Unbelievable. Aside from the bonus stats, the orcs also received the guild buffs that all the members of Heaven's Gate were given. Active guild buffs. 300% health regeneration. 300% mana regeneration. 300% stamina regeneration. 100% chance to learn skills from beast cores. 100% immunity to charm skill. 100% increase in experience points when killing monsters. 25% chance of getting better monster drops. 25% chance of resisting status ailments. 20% increase in physical and magical attacks. 20% increase in physical and magical defense. 20% bonus success rate in crafting items. Ha ha ha. Oreg laughed and raised his clenched fists high up in the air. We can now win. The orcs already had very strong regeneration abilities. But after joining Heaven's Gate, their regeneration abilities were boosted even further, allowing the injuries they received from the earlier explosion heal at a rapid pace. Barca, Lady Aviana half-shouted as she looked at her husband. I know, Barca nodded his head. I understand. The vice-chieftain of the Blackrock clan pressed his arms together and gave a brief bow of respect to the half-elf before saying something that made Lux shudder. Please temporarily invite the entire Blackrock clan to your guild, Barca pleaded. After gaining the unprecedented strength in his body, Barca finally understood what Lux meant when he said that he would help them win the war. Little did he know that Lux was as surprised as he was when the bonus stats appeared, and the half-elf simply had no choice but to act as if everything was under his control. Very well, Lux nodded. I will give Lady Aviana the authority to recruit all of your brethren to my guild. Lux no longer hesitated and tweaked the settings of his guild, giving the orc chieftain the ability to recruit every member of the Blackrock clan. After receiving Lux's blessing, Lady Aviana raised her scepter high up in the air and shouted, "Listen to me, my people." Lady Aviana shouted, catching the attention of every orc inside the capital city. I order all of you to accept the invitation that I am going to send to all of you. It is time for us to launch our counterattack. It is time to show the humans that they cannot defeat our clan. Rally to me. Immediately, rows of texts appeared in front of all the members of the Blackrock clan, which shocked all of them. However, after receiving their orc chieftain's orders, they overcame their initial surprise and accepted the guild invitation. Just like what happened earlier, all the orcs received the blessings of the guild, making them all shout their war cries. The Dryad Queen and her subordinates looked at the orcs around them in astonishment. Not only had the members of the Blackrock clan been able to join the Half-Elves Guild, but a strong surge of aura had swept through their surroundings as each of them had accepted the invitation. What? All the orcs have suddenly become stronger, one of the Dryads exclaimed. The Dryads were very sensitive to the flow of aura and magic. Because of this, they immediately felt the changes that came over the orcs, who suddenly regained their will to fight. Baranar patted Lux's shoulder. We're counting on you, he said, ignoring the surprise written on the faces of the Dryad Queen and her subordinates. Let's do this. The half-elf nodded as he raised his hand. Everyone get ready, Lux stated as he summoned his undead legion in preparation for their counterattack. It's time to show the enemy who they are messing with. Hakka Dynasty Army Central Formation. The orcs are shouting their war cries, Ronan sneered. I guess they have finally decided to make their suicide charge. Ha ha ha. Bring it on. The other high-rankers were also looking forward to the one-sided massacre that was about to commence, so they also prepared to meet the orcs who were about to make their last hurrah. The capital city of the orcs was covered in thick smoke, so they weren't able to see what was happening inside. Even so, the great general of the Hakka dynasty raised his voice and gave his orders to his subordinates. Load Argonaut-ranked cores into the magic cannons and wait for my command. Great General Garrett shouted. Archers and mages, make your preparations and wait for my orders. Vanguard, hold your ground and protect the front line. Immediately, the vanguard soldiers raised their shields and pointed their spears forward. Although the orcs were still inside their city, they could feel their war cries growing louder, which meant that the orcs were about to charge at them. Great General Garrett knew that this was bound to happen, so he had prepared the appropriate response in order to decimate the orcs before they could even reach their front lines. Suddenly, something came out of the thick smoke, catching everyone's attention. Check out LTSDVL on NOVL/bind CM. A scary-looking creature, who looked very similar to an orc, holding a large shield, and a spiked mace in his hand started to run forward. A moment later, several more figures who shared the same features ran beside him with their shields raised high. Everyone on my mark. Pazuzu shouted as he and the elite spirit protectors ran side by side, forming a V-shaped formation with the fortress defender at its center. Mad Lad Rush! Mad Lad Rush! Pazuzu and Lux's elite spirit protectors served as the vanguard of the charge, knowing that they would face the brunt of the Hakka dynasty's bombardment. However, they didn't care. This was the order of their master, and they would carry out this order till their last breath. The orc warriors, led by Barca, ran behind Pazuzu and his elite spirit protectors as fast as they could. Their goal was to reach the enemy's main army, and they wouldn't stop until they hacked the hateful humans who had destroyed their capital city to pieces. Magical cannons fire! Great General Garrett ordered, and the 19 magical cannons unleashed a barrage of magical cannonballs to obliterate the orcs that were coming their way. Shield wall. Pazuzu roared. Shield wall. Immediately, a giant blue tower shield materialized in front of the orc army. When the magical cannonballs hit the tower shields, several cracks appeared on their surface, but they didn't shatter. Pazuzu and his brethren endured the attack with grace as blood spilled from the corner of their lips. Second round, fire. Great General Garrett ordered, and the magical cannons fired another lethal barrage against their targets. The head engineer clenched his fist as he looked at his allies who were desperately trying to reach their location. He had already done his best to sabotage the magical cannons, significantly decreasing their destructive power, which allowed Pazuzu to endure the first barrage. Unfortunately, even with the decreased impact, the magical cannonballs were powered by Argonaut-ranked beast cores, which still had enough destructive force to decimate anything they hit. When the second round of magical cannonballs hit their targets, the tower shields shattered, and the elite spirit protectors disintegrated into particles of light. Only Pazuzu was left, and he barely survived the onslaught. Eiko, who was perched on top of Lux's head, narrowed her eyes as she opened her mouth. They were still a good distance away from their enemies, but she gauged that this was the perfect time to unleash the surprise she had planted a few days ago. Archers and mages, prepare to fly. Great General Garrett wasn't able to finish his words because the ground under the vanguard rose up, followed by a loud explosion that drowned the rest of his orders. Boom, boom, boom. Eiko shouted, and immediately, all the skeleton bombs and blast bombs, EX, that she had planted deep under the earth detonated at the same time. Countless soldiers died in that powerful explosion, and countless more were swallowed by the ground as they fell to their deaths. The dust cloud that was caused by the eruption also gave them zero visibility, making it hard for them to see what was in front of them. Complete chaos spread in the surroundings as no one knew what had just happened. All they knew was that, as they were about to unleash their arrows and spells on their enemies, their vanguard was suddenly obliterated by the countless number of explosions that had been set off around them. It was at that moment when the rest of the Hakka dynasty's army felt the ground under their feet tremble, and the sound of countless galloping war beasts reached their ears. Great General Garrett immediately waved his sword, creating a powerful gust of wind that blew the dust cloud away from his surroundings. As soon as the dust cloud disappeared, the humans were finally able to see their surroundings. However, it was too late. For the clan, Barca roared in anger as he leapt towards the human army with his weapon raised high. Rowan, who had managed to survive the explosion earlier, gritted his teeth as he raised his shield to block Barca's incoming attack. The Empyrean-ranked alpha monster locked on the enemy commander, who had once taunted him in the past. With one powerful slash, the strongest member of the Blackrock clan unleashed all the pent-up rage he had endured in the past and sent the arrogant human commander flying like a golf ball being hit by a golf club. He completely annihilated all those that stood in the path of his devastating attack, which cut the land in half. For the clan, the thunderous roar of the orcs, who had been waiting for this day to come, reverberated throughout the surroundings, striking fear into the hearts of those who heard it and sending a shudder inside their chest. Barca led the charge with a strike, and the orc raiders of the orc army led by Tanaber followed, also clashing against the human army. All of them were out for blood. Their wargs leaped over the defenders holding the front line and landed dozens of meters behind them, starting a massacre. Oreg and the orc berserkers clashed against the human formation with their weapons, hungering for the blood of their enemies. Complete chaos erupted within the human army as their formation broke apart due to the ferocity of the orcs' counterattack. Hold your ground. Great General Garrett shouted to rally his troops and regain control of the situation as the army was now fighting in close combat with the Blackrock clan. Follow the strategy we discussed. Rankers, attack your respective targets. After giving out his orders, the high-ranking fighters of the Hakka dynasty clashed with the orc army and stopped their advance. All the high-profile targets like Barca, Lady Aviana, and the 4 orc warlords had teams designated to contain them once the orcs reached their formation. This was a well-detailed plan that Great General Garrett had made in order to ensure that they would prevail against their enemies. These teams were meticulously put together to counter the destructive power of the higher-ups of the Blackrock clan, and he was sure that it would only be a matter of time before their targets were slain or immobilized. However, contrary to his expectations, his perfect plan started to crumble in the face of the orcs, who for some reason were stronger than they initially expected. Damn it, the reports didn't say that Barca was this strong. Ronan, who had tasted Barca's full-powered strike, propped himself up from the ground and looked at his legendary shield that now had a big dent in it. A stinging pain was throbbing in his arm as he held the shield in his hand, which proved that even he was unable to escape Barca's attack unscathed. He is truly a monster. Ronan gritted his teeth as he ran to where the other high-rankers were confronting Barca. It was common sense that the Empyrean-ranked alpha monster was the greatest threat on the battlefield, so their goal was to eliminate him as soon as they could in order to lower the morale of their enemies. Just as Ronan was running towards the rampaging Barca, he noticed something that was happening on the battlefield, causing him to freeze on the spot. "You undead?" Ronan gasped in shock. "I thought Baranar was an orc shaman and not a necromancer. What is happening here?" Visit en Velbund. CM for EU Ovels. It was not only Ronan who was surprised at the sudden appearance of the unholy creatures on the battlefield. Orcs that had died in battle stood up on the battlefield once more to protect their brethren who were about to be killed by the humans. The orcs, who saw this scene, were surprised at first. But after seeing that their fallen brethren were protecting them from getting killed by the humans made them realize that, even in death, they were fighting to protect their clan. This sparked a burning determination in the hearts of all the orcs, which made their attacks fiercer and more devastating than ever before. Where are these undead coming from? Great General Garrett narrowed his eyes as he scanned the battle at the front lines. I never heard news that the Wanted Kingdom had necromancers among their ranks. The Great General calmly raised his hand and gave an order to their clerics to deal with the undead, who were weak against holy magic. Turn undead. Several clerics shouted in unison as they pointed at the skeleton gangbangers in the distance, who were mercilessly cutting through their defensive lines. A few seconds later, the skeleton gangbangers that were targeted by the clerics all turned to dust, making those who were fighting against them feel relieved. However, before anyone could even celebrate, a chilling voice reached their ears. "So, that's where you guys are hiding." Black lightning bolts rained down from the sky, targeting the clerics that were dealing with the undead. The strategist of Lux's covenant unleashed a barrage of black lightning bolts that were fueled by the abyssal touch to the archenemy of his master's army. Zagan managed to eliminate a few dozen of the clerics before he was forced to retreat. His forte lay in hit-and-run tactics, so he couldn't stay for long, or else he would be taken down by the mages, who had started to aim at him from the ground. Great General Garrett was about to issue another command when he suddenly paused and jumped off his warhorse in a hurry. A second later, a magic cannonball landed on his location, killing his subordinates, who were responsible for carrying out his orders. Great General Garrett glared at the head engineer in the distance who had aimed the magical cannon in his direction. "You! What do you think you're doing?" Great General Garrett shouted in anger as he looked at the man who was responsible for overseeing the operation of the magic cannons. "I guess the title of Untouchable is not just for show," the head engineer said with a smile. "I don't know if you have clairvoyance, premonition, intuition, or future sight, but it doesn't matter. I will find out soon enough." The head engineer raised his hand, and several shadow warriors activated all 19 magic cannons at the same time. The engineers that were manning them earlier were now all lying on the ground, dead. These pitiful non-combatants didn't even know what killed them until it was too late. Dust clouds rose up in the sky as the magical bombardment commenced. All the high-ranking fighters, with the exception of Great General Garrett, were on the front lines dealing with the orcs. They didn't expect that someone would attack them from the rear, so they were all taken by surprise. Just as Great General Garrett was about to order his men to deal with the head engineer and the shadow warriors who were attacking them from behind, he momentarily froze before stomping on the ground to launch himself into the sky. A moment later, the dead bodies around him exploded, killing and injuring the soldiers that were within the range of Luxa's deadly skill. From the sky, the great general of the Hakka dynasty turned his head to the side and locked on the body of the red-headed teenager who was looking back at him from the rear of the orc formation. His intuition, which had been sharpened by the countless campaigns that he participated in the past, allowed Great General Garrett to understand who the greatest threat on the battlefield was. It was neither Barca nor the orc warlords that had tilted the balance of the war. No, it was none other than the initiate-ranked Necromancer, who at this very moment was summoning his legion of undead, while making the dead bodies on the battlefield explode, creating more casualties among the men under the Great General's command. "Kill that red-headed boy over there." Great General Garrett commanded the rankers that were on the front lines. "He is the Necromancer that is summoning the undead. Kill him first." The Great General's thunderous shout shook the battlefield, informing those who were near the half-elf to eliminate him as soon as possible. "Looks like my cover is blown," Lux said with an amused smile. Beside him stood his trusted comrades Pazuzu, Orion, All Might, and Revan. They were there to protect their master from being targeted by the enemy. It was not only his trusted subordinates that were there to shield him from harm. Baranar was also present because he had been entrusted by Lady Aviana to ensure Lux's safety. "Get ready," Baranar growled as he summoned his elite spirit warriors that numbered almost 1,000 to act as their bodyguards. "They're coming." More than 20 rankers broke through the orcs' ranks in order to reach the half-elf who was at the rear of their enemies. Great General Garrett wanted to personally eliminate the Necromancer, but he wasn't in the position to do that as the commanding officer of the army. For the time being, he ordered his subordinates to also deal with the magical cannons, which had fallen into the hands of their enemies. Now that the human army was being attacked from the front and the back, they had no choice but to divide their attention in order to cope with the unexpected changes on the battlefield. Just as Great General Garrett thought that all problems had been dealt with, he saw something from the corner of his eye that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Corpse explosion," Asmodeus shouted as he unleashed the devastating spell that had reaped countless lives on the battlefield. A few days ago, he and Lux had buried countless dead bodies under the land where they assumed the Hakka dynasty would mount their siege against the orc capital city. It was a gamble that they needed to try to gain the upper hand in the battle that would decide the fate of the Blackrock clan. Fortunately, the army had positioned themselves just as they expected, allowing them to utilize the traps they had planted beforehand. Truth be told, they were worried about Great General Garrett's ability because according to the Blackrock clan, the Great General had a knack for getting out of harm's way before it even started. Because of this, they thought that their trap would be seen through. However, contrary to their expectations, the enemy even stood on top of them as if asking to be killed by Aiko's bombs, as well as Lux's corpse explosions. Just like the rumble of countless fireworks, all of the corpses that were buried under the ground were detonated, sending bones and pieces of flesh flying in every direction. The stench of death and destruction immediately spread across the battlefield, killing countless humans due to the stacking necrotic damage of the corpse explosion. Asmodeus made sure to only detonate the corpses that were far away from the orcs, to prevent them from getting entangled in the spell that couldn't differentiate friend from foe. Just as the Great General thought that things couldn't get any worse, a blood golem towering 20 meters tall suddenly appeared on the battlefield. It wasted no time in delivering the killing blow to the nearby soldiers, who were initially lucky to survive the effects of the corpse explosion spell. Unfortunately, the blood golem wasn't able to kill to its heart's content because it was split in half by the sword that the Great General wielded in his hands. Great General Garrett was an SS ranker, which was only slightly weaker than the previous Barca. S/N, before Barca joined Heaven's Gate. The blood golem had only reached the Daimos rank, so it was fairly easy for the Great General to eliminate the nearest threat before it could grow stronger. The magical cannons have been successfully reclaimed, Great General Garrett sighed as he glanced at the rear of their formation. "I can't believe that the head engineer would betray us. Does he not fear the dynasty's wrath?" The Great General couldn't understand why one of their people would go out of their way to sabotage their campaign and backstab them from behind. He couldn't think of any reason why the head engineer would side with the orcs, especially when they had the upper hand in the war. With the threat at their rear taken care of, the great general shifted his attention to the orcs that were fighting fiercely at the front lines. Due to how greatly they underestimated Barca and his subordinates, the high rankers had no other choice but to ask the other high rankers to reinforce them in battle. This forced the high rankers to abandon their mission to kill the lower-ranked orcs and wipe them out as soon as possible. Although he wasn't too happy with how the war progressed at the start, everything was now being handled properly, allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief. But as he gazed at his surroundings, he noticed that something was missing. Read lat SDCH pictures on N/V/L/V/IDCM. Something very important to their army. While the great general was thinking about what that thing was, a loud shout reached his ears. "Everyone, back away." Immediately, the orcs who were fighting at the front lines retreated. Barca, Oreg, and Tanabur also didn't hesitate to back away and return to where their army had gathered. All three of them were covered with wounds, but these injuries slowly regenerated as they distanced themselves from the high rankers who had been assigned to contain them. **T. Ronan cursed out loud as he gazed at something that he never thought possible. The other high rankers also gasped upon the sight of the weapon of war that was now aimed in their direction. "Erect the barrier on our right flank." Great General Garrett immediately ordered as the silhouette of a giant, crystal dragon appeared on the right side of their army. He had noticed that something was missing from their army, but he didn't expect that the enemy had managed to snatch it while everyone was busy dealing with the mayhem around them. Great General Garrett sent a sidelong glance at the red-headed teenager who had just been stabbed by one of the rankers that he had ordered to eliminate the greatest threat on the battlefield. However, instead of being happy, a grim expression appeared on his face when the teenage boy suddenly turned to dust after getting stabbed in the chest. A clone. The great general gritted his teeth before shifting his gaze at the 50-meter-tall crystal dragon whose jaws were open wide in preparation to launch its signature breath attack. The high rankers of the human army all cursed internally as a very familiar-looking giant magic circle that would amplify any magical attack by several folds, materialized in front of the crystal dragon. Just how? Great General Garrett clenched his fists in frustration when he saw that one of their trump cards, the Destroyer, had fallen into their enemy's hands without their knowledge. Lux, who was standing at the base of the magical artifact, roared as he unleashed the attack that would turn anything it hit into crystal statues, which was the crystal dragon's ultimate attack. Since Lux was only an initiate, the power of this breath attack only reached up to the full-powered strike of an ear anchor. However, the Destroyer increased the devastating power of this multiple times until it reached the realm of a grand spell. No one among the high-ranking officers of the Hakka dynasty dreamed of having their own weapon turned against them. They never thought about a way to counter it, so all they could do now was pray that they would survive this attack that could obliterate entire mountains. Crystal Dragon's Breath. The crystal dragon behind Lux unleashed a sparkling breath made up of countless crystals, which was amplified by the magic circle in front of it. All the mages, clerics, and defenders of the Hakka dynasty activated their defensive spells to their maximum limit, creating an almost impenetrable shield that would protect them from even the strongest of spells. Unfortunately, a grand spell was different. It was a spell that could only be blocked by a force that was equal to or stronger than it. As soon as the crystal breath attack and the barrier collided, the sound of countless crystals breaking spread across the battlefield. A few seconds later, the barriers shattered, allowing the grand spell to descend mercilessly upon the human army, who didn't even have time to scream before they turned into crystal statues, whose beauty would remain for eternity.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.